Welcome to Roots and Futures. I am Dr. Jasmine Harris, Department Chair of Africana Studies at Metropolitan State University. This is a platform for amplifying local and global Black experiences. We're going to be talking about Black communities. We're going to be talking to Black people and trying to understand the connections and disconnections across the diaspora. So join us. Welcome back to Roots and Futures. I am Dr. Jasmine Harris.
I am Pius Kamau, Dr. Pius Kamau.
And today we are going to talk about Black folks in STEM. I think that this is actually very apropos because there have been some very interesting conversations going around academic social media right now about the differences between STEM and humanities. So I have things to say, but we are going to start, instead of a quote today, we're going to start with a statistic from the National Science Foundation. And this is from 2021. So it's a little bit dated, but if y'all know science, it takes us a while to get our information out there. So Black or African American workers comprised in 2021 only 8% of workers in STEM occupations in the United States. And so today we're going to sort of talk about why that number is so low, what the relationship is between Black folks and STEM at multiple levels. Pius, you're a STEM guy.
This is a truly interesting subject because science really, our modern age, modern times really depend on science to a great deal. And the training of scientists, I think, is extremely important. Sadly, though, as we are saying now, the numbers are not that encouraging. But that said, and I want to say from the very beginning that there is hope. The hope being that, and I've been reading about HBCUs, that HBCUs in general are graduating more and more STEM graduates, as opposed to other institutions. So kudos to STEM.
Yeah.
To HBCUs.
Morgan State University in Maryland is one of the fastest growing universities in the country right now. At a moment when many schools, including the school that I teach at, is very concerned about enrollment numbers, about the demographic enrollment cliff, right, that we're about to head into because of the birth rate drop off during the recession in 2008 and 2009. And they're not seeing any of that. And I just saw on social media this morning a picture of their graduating class of nurses, and they had 100% grad rate and licensure passing rate, and they are the #1 nursing school in the state of Maryland right now. So I think that you're absolutely right that that there are HBCs that are trying to pick up the mantle around STEM in particular.
Which is really good. It's wonderful, and they should be encouraged to continue doing that. So the question is, why do minorities not do so well in STEM, science, technology?
Well, is it that they're not doing well, or is it that they just opt out and avoid it?
Well, there's I don't know. I don't know whether they avoid it or not. We know that the numbers are not high enough, and I have a small point to make, which is mathematics. Mathematics is really the basis of science. And people, you have to do well in math to do physics. You have to do well in math to do chemistry.
Mhm.
So in other words, I mean, it kind of comes from there, you know, and uh, and the teaching of mathematics in black schools, black elementary schools, black middle schools. I mean, middle school and high schools. I don't think is good. Yeah, I mean, it's poor, because you have to have teachers who are really willing to go to bat with children who are not doing so well. So let me tell you how I think about mathematics.
Okay.
I think of math as a different language.
Mhm. It is.
So in other words, if I'm going to learn French or Spanish, I am going to be much, much better. I'm going to do much better in French or Spanish if at home my parents were speaking those languages.
Right.
It's just, you know, and so in other words, if we really want to crack that nut of mathematics, we have to think of it as a different language and begin very early to teach it.
Mhm.
And so in kindergarten and in elementary schools,
Mhm.
we should be somehow injecting these terminologies,
Mhm.
which are going to be the pillars and that are the basis of high school mathematics.
Yeah.
So in other words, the concept of algebra and the concept of geometry,
Mhm.
should be somehow begun and added early.
Yeah.
If we are going to end up. So in other words, I think if you ask me the question, why don't we have more STEM students,
Mhm.
minority students,
Mhm.
is because we don't do such a good job in mathematics.
Of teaching them the language of STEM.
Teaching them
Yeah.
the language of STEM.
Yeah.
Because you begin with mathematics, and with that, the other thing which I think is truly important is children need somebody who loves them, somebody who mentors them with love and care.
Mhm.
And we don't have more mentors
Yeah.
at that level.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that, well, and maybe I want to ask you this,
Absolutely,
right?
sure.
Is it is it simply that we're not introducing the language early enough, right? Because I do understand that as someone who started taking French in 6th grade and, took it through college and still only sort of mildly can communicate when I'm in French speaking countries, there is a difference between starting to learn a language at 11 compared to starting to learn it at birth, right? Or at
Absolutely,
4 or
absolutely.
5 years old, right? Because your brain is more malleable. So I understand that part. But I also wonder if, and we were talking about this in a previous episode when I was talking about Black diseducation, how much of that poor scoring in math and science classes by Black students is about not being exposed to the language early enough, and how much of it is a socialized belief, self perception that they just can't do math, right? We've heard this with girls before.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Mhm.
This thing that science teachers and math teachers always tell children, and it's wrong, that math is hard.
Mhm.
You are not able to do math.
Mhm.
I think everybody is able to do math. We do math on a regular basis. I mean, when you're telling me the distance of a place,
Right.
the price of things,
Right.
that's math.
Right.
Math is a part of what we do on a regular basis,
Mhm.
and it's really unfortunate for anybody or a teacher to say You can't do this because math is hard.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, I think some of us are not so good at taking tests. T- Test taking is is an art. It's an
Yeah.
art that you learn,
Mm-hmm.
and we should teach children how to take to take this test. I mean,
Right.
which their lives are going to depend on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we should be doing that on a regular basis. And if I may also revert a little bit to a previous podcast that we did, which is essentially that black black teachers should be somehow taught, should be given lessons and taught how to take teacher training tests before they do them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also true now. I mean, of what we are talking about now. The more you practice answering these questions,
Mm-hmm.
the better you'll become.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so in essence, then I'm trying to say that in middle school, we should begin teaching the children how to answer the test they're going to be asked from ACTs and
Mm.
SATs.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of a high school.
Right.
So the drilling of answers in math, in geometry,
Mm-hmm.
in algebra,
Mm-hmm.
and calculus
Yeah.
when the moment does come.
Problem sets, right? You get a
Problem
problem set,
Absolutely.
and you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice, right, over and over again.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly, exactly. Another example which I have is I belong to a group called Colorado Math Award.
Hmm.
Colorado Math Awards, and it's a group which has been sort of been in present for 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
I just joined them a few years ago, and they help kids in high school and in middle school and college to do different math tests.
Mm.
Because I mean you have different groups, I mean, that do give math.
Right.
The American Math Association, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the point I was trying to get at is that the kids who are doing best, 90% of the kids who are at the highest ranks are Asians.
Mm-hmm.
Very few whites,
Mm-hmm.
very few white Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because the parents of most of those kids are scientists.
Mm.
The parents are computer scientists.
Oh, right.
They're engineers.
Mm-hmm.
They're chemists. They're all these South Asians who have come to this country, to work at Google or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So no wonder they're doing so well, because the language of mathematics
Yeah.
begins
Early.
when they are born.
Yeah.
They begin to talk to. So things like that.
Yeah. No, I the reason that I asked the question is because when I teach social statistics, right? I'm a sociologist and I'm a methodologist. And I just teach the kind of statistics that I use, which are basic social statistics, not logarithmic regressions or, any of that complicated stuff. And when it comes down to it, the equation might look a little funky, right? Because it's got symbols for summation and frequency, and there's squaring, and there's square roots and ends everywhere, right? But what I try to explain to my students in our research methods class, which is a requirement of our Africana Studies majors, is that when you break it down, this is just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Like that's it.
That's it.
And if you can rearrange the equation to be more in line with the language that right? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. I'm assuming that the college students know that.
Mhm.
Then you will find it easier to understand this process rather than looking at the full equation and all of the letters and numbers and stuff and saying, I don't know how to do that,
Yeah,
right?
it makes no sense at all.
Exactly.
It's Greek to me.
Right, exactly. Well, and the thing about that is, and I feel this way oftentimes when I'm confronted with French, right? It's like, okay, I just have to slow this down and break it down. What's the root word? What's the tense they're trying to use here? What's the, is this a female word or a male word, which only makes sense in the Romance languages, but um, but I think that we don't train students how to logically move from one thing to the next, right? So, like, if someone put a French novel in front of me, at first I'd say, I can't read this,
can't read it.
right? Because,
Exactly, yeah.
but if I took it word by word and sentence by sentence, yeah, that might slow me down, but I will be able to read the words. And I think that education has become so much about the test, right? And and how to learn for the test, that what we have lost is teaching students how to sort of critically work through math and science, not just from a standardized test perspective, but from like a critical eye perspective. And I think, again, like you were talking about a second ago, going back to a previous podcast about Black teachers, that's why it's so important to have teachers who can sort of culturally, in a culturally relevant way, break down and explain to students what they're seeing and what the work is that they need to do. But because we don't have that, because we're preparing students for state-sanctioned standardized testing, which is white-centric, for nationwide testing like the ACT and the SAT that we know has a sort of white, culturally centric approach, we are putting Black students at a disadvantage to learning that sort of that critical thought process in middle school, in high school. And so then when they get to college, the last thing that they're thinking about is majoring in math or physics or or
Exactly.
aerodynamics or something like that.
Yeah.
When in reality they actually might be well suited to it if there was someone to sort of break down those relationships, right? So I have these two Black students. They're both, one's a minor, one's a double major, and they're going to be seniors, and they haven't taken their math
Mm.
general studies requirement course yet. And they've been putting it off, but they have to take it now so they can graduate. So they've decided to take the same class with the same teacher at the same time so that they can support each other. And I've already called the math department to try to get them tutors, right? But like, these are two bright students. They do math, right? Like, one of them is an anthropologist and the other is in psychological sciences. So like, they are being, shown and using math in different ways. They just have been socialized, right, to think of themselves as divested from the skills of mathematics in a way that I think is specific to Black students.
It's a very unfortunate. It's it's unfortunate that we are we are sort of acculturating our students to think of science and math as difficult. I think what we should be doing and need to do and have to do is to begin at elementary school teaching children something called a periodic table. All elements fit somewhere in a periodic
I feel
table.
like I learned the periodic table in elementary school.
But how many? It's so much fun. If a
I
kid,
had fun,
even if
but
your
I didn't.
hydrogen comes here, sodium comes here, silicon comes here, and also to begin learning things like Pythagoras theorem, you know, pi r squared. But if a child can learn about Pythagoras and about pi and about Archimedes, but I mean, earlier on, if they can begin learning that at elementary school, the same thing they get to middle school, they already know those things. There's something called pi. They know what pi is, So in other words, the fun, there's a fun of the subject.
Right.
Inject joy,
Yeah.
not sadness, but joy.
I hear you. I just think that the white public education system in the United States doesn't want to do that, right? Like,
Well, leave them, let them be. But
no, I get what I'm saying is
yeah,
like
I know.
what I think makes Asian countries unique in the reasons that their students are so far ahead of ours in math and science. Well, no, it's that they are a homogenous society,
That's
right?
true.
And
Yeah,
so they're not building systems into their education institution, right, to create these hierarchies, to disadvantage some students. They can just focus on education, on injecting joy. I've seen crazy classrooms in Japan where they're doing stuff where you're like, these are going to be, the next leaders of the world. Why are we not having our 5-year-old students do that? And a lot of times the answer is because we spend so much time in our educational system trying to push people down, right? Like, let's not hire the black teacher with a master's degree in mathematics to the school that can teach elementary school kids something, because why do we need a a teacher, a black teacher with that level of education in this school for these kids who don't care about it anyway, right? And so black students in particular, I believe, learn the absence of joy in education in first grade, in kindergarten, right?
It's unfortunate.
Because and the reason that I say that is because, like, and in my book I talk all about how I went to one of the best public school districts in the country at the time, so it's a little bit different, but like, we did learn the periodic table. We did find owl pellets and dissect them and rebuild the rodent bodies, right, with the bones in them. But that was a very white school, right? And I don't know if the black students were doing that at their school, but even if they were, under the conditions that we understand those schools to have, it's much more difficult for them to internalize those things that they're learning in a way that impacts positively their educational trajectory going forward. And in Asian countries, students just don't have to worry about that. And in fact, because they don't have to worry about that, they've created all of these other caste systems where you have to get a certain score on a test to be to go further or to be in certain positions. And so, countries are going to create hierarchies, but because ours is so racially motivated, it makes what looks like a disinterest in math and science on a collective cultural level actually be a reflection of the structure of the institution more broadly, I think.
So if there are two things I would like to sort of say before we finish here. One is that education doesn't end when you finish school.
That's true.
Education should continue the rest of your lives. If you are not good at math when you're in high school or college, please go back and take a book of math and begin refreshing. Get better. Math is fun. Is truly beautiful. So learn it. Learn it all the rest of your life.
Yeah.
The second thing that I would also like to say, the civil rights that we have just decided we are going to rededicate ourselves to begin fighting for our civil rights. Math should include us should be included in that civil rights.
I think, school more broadly, right?
Yes,
Like
education.
this is how we move
Yes.
towards the future, right? We try to show students where they're being held back purposely in many cases, institutionally, right? And then ask them to, as much as they can, fight against that by educating themselves and going back to what you said earlier, to a community that is much more invested communally to the continued education of our kids. Yeah. All right. That was kind of an emotional one for me. Thank you all so much. I just, I want our kids to enjoy school, in the ways
It's
that
so
you were
much
talking about.
fun
Right. Right.
studying chemistry, studying biology.
Right.
I mean, studying math. There's nothing more fun than that.
That's coming from two nerds. Thank y'all so much for listening. And this is actually our last episode of the season. So thank you all for sticking with us this first season as we figure out the kinks and everything. And we look forward to coming back in the fall with a whole new set of episodes, some students, some guests, and it'll be fun.
But then all my books should all be sold. I'll have 1 million books sold.
Yes, fingers crossed. All right, everyone, have a great summer. We'll see you in the fall.
This podcast is powered by The Plug.